How Nelson Mandela fought institutional racism and spent 27 years in prison for freedom. Welcome back to our channel, where we dive deep into the most extraordinary stories of human resilience and transformation that have shaped our world. Today, we embark on a profound journey through one of the most remarkable chapters in the fight for freedom and equality. The incredible story of Nelson Mandela's 27-year imprisonment and his transformation from a freedom fighter to the moral conscience of a nation. This is not merely a story about a man who spent nearly 3 decades behind bars, but rather an extraordinary tale of how unwavering determination, moral courage, and an unbreakable spirit can triumph over the most oppressive systems of injustice that humanity has ever devised. The year was 1962, when the world witnessed the arrest of a man who would become one of history's most revered figures, though at the time, few could have imagined the profound impact this moment would have on the course of human rights and social justice globally. Nelson Mandela, a lawyer-turned-activist, found himself caught in the iron grip of South Africa's apartheid regime, a system so brutal and dehumanizing that it would become synonymous with institutional racism and oppression throughout the world. His initial arrest came not for violent crimes or acts of terrorism, but for the simple acts of leaving his country without proper documentation and encouraging his fellow citizens to stand up against an unjust system through organized strikes and peaceful protests. The circumstances surrounding Mandela's imprisonment were deeply rooted in the systematic oppression that had plagued South Africa for decades, where the white minority government had constructed an elaborate legal framework designed to maintain racial segregation and deny basic human rights to the majority black population. When the apartheid regime made the calculated decision to ban all forms of peaceful protest and demonstration, they effectively closed off every avenue for legitimate political expression and change, leaving activists like Mandela with an impossible choice between accepting perpetual subjugation or exploring alternative methods of resistance that might challenge the foundations of this oppressive system. It was within this context of desperation and moral urgency that Mandela made the fateful decision to help establish Umkhonto we Sizwe, which translates to Spear of the Nation in English, serving as the armed wing of the African National Congress. This organization represented a fundamental shift in strategy for the liberation movement, moving away from the purely non-violent approach that had characterized their previous efforts toward a more comprehensive resistance campaign that would include acts of sabotage targeting government infrastructure while carefully avoiding harm to human life whenever possible. The formation of Umkhonto we Sizwe was not a decision taken lightly by Mandela and his colleagues, but rather represented the culmination of years of frustration with a government that had systematically refused to engage in meaningful dialogue or consider any form of political reform that might address the legitimate grievances of the oppressed majority. The organization's primary strategy focused on sabotaging government buildings, power installations, and other symbols of state authority, with the explicit goal of demonstrating the government's vulnerability while avoiding the loss of human life that would inevitably accompany a full-scale armed rebellion. However, the apartheid government's extensive security apparatus, supported by a network of informants and sophisticated surveillance techniques, eventually uncovered evidence of these clandestine activities, leading to what would become known as the infamous Rivonia Trial. This legal proceeding, which began in 1963 and extended well into 1964, would transform from a simple criminal prosecution into one of the most significant political trials of the 20th century, providing Mandela and his co-defendants with an unprecedented platform to articulate their vision for a democratic and non-racial South Africa to both domestic and international audiences. The Rivonia Trial represented far more than a mere legal proceeding. It became a dramatic confrontation between two fundamentally incompatible visions of South African society. with the apartheid government seeking to portray Mandela and his colleagues as dangerous terrorists and communist agitators, while the defendants used every opportunity to expose the moral bankruptcy and inherent violence of the apartheid system itself. Throughout the lengthy proceedings, Mandela demonstrated remarkable composure and intellectual rigor, transforming what the government intended as a showcase of its power into a powerful indictment of institutionalized racism and oppression. During his famous speech from the dock, Mandela delivered words that would resonate across generations and continents, declaring his willingness to die for the principles of human dignity, equality, and freedom that he held dear. This extraordinary moment of moral courage, delivered in the face of almost certain death, crystallized the fundamental issues at stake in South Africa, his struggle against apartheid, and helped galvanize international opinion against the white minority regime. The court's decision to sentence Mandela and his co-defendants to life imprisonment rather than death was influenced by a combination of factors, including growing international pressure concerns about creating martyrs for the liberation movement, and perhaps a recognition that execution might provoke even more radical forms of resistance. Nevertheless, the life sentence represented what many observers believed would effectively end Mandela's political career and remove him permanently from the struggle for freedom and equality in South Africa. The harsh reality of Mandela's imprisonment began immediately with his transfer to Robben Island, a windswept piece of land located 7 miles off the coast of Cape Town that had served as a place of banishment and punishment for centuries. This maximum security facility, surrounded by treacherous waters and patrolled by armed guards, was designed to break the spirit of political prisoners through a combination of hard physical labor, psychological isolation, and deliberate humiliation that reflected the apartheid government's determination to crush any form of organized resistance. Life on Robben Island was characterized by a brutal routine that began before dawn and extended well into the evening, with prisoners subjected to backbreaking labor in the island's limestone quarry under the scorching South African sun. The work was not merely physically demanding, but deliberately designed to be psychologically devastating as educated professionals and political leaders found themselves reduced to breaking rocks with primitive tools while enduring constant verbal abuse from guards who took pleasure in their position of power over men they had been taught to view as subhuman. The conditions of imprisonment extended far beyond physical hardship to encompass a systematic assault on human dignity that included inadequate food rations carefully calculated to maintain prisoners at the edge of malnutrition. The apartheid authorities clearly hoped that these conditions would not only punish the prisoners, but ultimately break their resolve and force them to renounce their political beliefs in exchange for better treatment or possible release. However, rather than succumbing to despair or abandoning their principles, Mandela and his fellow political prisoners transformed Robben Island into what became known as Mandela University, creating an informal but highly effective educational system that allowed them to continue their intellectual development and political education despite the harsh conditions of their confinement. Through clandestine study groups, carefully concealed discussions, and the sharing of smuggled books and newspapers, the prisoners maintained their connection to the outside world and continued to develop their understanding of political theory, economics, and international relations. During his years of imprisonment, Mandela underwent a profound personal transformation that would prove crucial to his later role as a reconciler and nation-builder, learning to moderate his earlier anger and bitterness while developing a more sophisticated understanding of the complex challenges that would face a post-apartheid South Africa. This evolution was not simply a matter of political calculation, but reflected a deep spiritual and intellectual journey that allowed him to see beyond the immediate struggle against oppression toward a vision of a unified and democratic society that could overcome the divisions created by centuries of racial conflict. The international campaign for Mandela's freedom gradually gained momentum throughout the 1970s and 1980s as activists around the world adopted him as a symbol of the struggle against apartheid and organized increasingly effective economic sanctions and cultural boycotts against the South African government. This global movement, combined with growing internal resistance and the changing international political environment following the end of the Cold War, created unprecedented pressure for political reform that the apartheid government could no longer ignore or suppress through purely repressive measures. In 1982, after 18 years on Robben Island, Mandela was transferred to Pollsmoor Prison on the mainland, where conditions were somewhat less harsh, but where he continued to be denied freedom while engaging in increasingly serious discussions with government representatives about the possibility of a negotiated transition to democracy. These preliminary contacts, conducted in absolute secrecy, represented the beginning of a process that would eventually lead to his release and the dismantling of the apartheid system. The final phase of Mandela's imprisonment took place at Victor Verster Prison, where he was housed in relative comfort while engaging in intensive negotiations with government officials about the terms and conditions for a peaceful transition to majority rule. These discussions required enormous courage and political wisdom from all parties involved, as they attempted to navigate between the competing demands of various constituencies while avoiding the kind of violent confrontation that could have destroyed any possibility of peaceful change. On February 11, 1990, after 27 years of imprisonment that had transformed him from a relatively unknown activist into a global icon of freedom and reconciliation, Nelson Mandela walked through the gates of Victor Verster Prison as a free man, his release broadcast live to audiences around the world who witnessed one of the most extraordinary moments in the history of human rights and political liberation. The image of Mandela, his fist raised in triumph, while walking hand in hand with his wife Winnie, became one of the defining moments of the late 20th century, symbolizing the triumph of human dignity over oppression and the power of moral courage to transform even the most entrenched systems of injustice. The story of Mandela's imprisonment and eventual release represents far more than the personal journey of one remarkable individual. It serves as a powerful testament to the capacity of the human spirit to endure suffering, maintain hope in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles, and ultimately triumph over injustice through the power of moral conviction and unwavering determination. His transformation from prisoner to president, accomplished through a commitment to reconciliation rather than revenge, provided a model for peaceful political transition that continues to inspire movements for freedom and equality around the world. As we reflect on this extraordinary chapter in human history, we are reminded that true freedom is never achieved without sacrifice, that justice requires both courage and wisdom, and that the most powerful force for positive change in the world remains the unshakable conviction that all human beings deserve to live with dignity, equality, and respect, regardless of their race, religion, or nationality. If this incredible story of resilience and transformation has moved you as much as it has inspired millions around the world, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories of human courage and triumph. Share this video with friends and family who need to hear about the power of never giving up on your principles, and let us know in the comments below which aspect of Mandela's journey resonates most strongly with you. Together, we can ensure that these crucial lessons about freedom, justice, and reconciliation continue to inspire future generations in their own struggles for a better world.